completely living the high life. He was married to Olga, the ballerina, and they led this very, very gilded existence. And then suddenly he creates this.
But I think this picture is a kind of turn away from that and towards something more difficult, more scary, and a bit madder. His friend, Ramon Pichot, died while he was painting the picture. He said that it should really be called The Death of Pichot. And he said that this shadow here represented the shade of Pichot. If you take this central dancer, it's been suggested that maybe the kind of crucifixion that's happening here might be being done to his wife.
I mean, it's not a very loving image of your wife, is it? She's got more than one face?
I'd say so. See if you can see them. I think the first face that we see when looking at this is it has an eye there, kind of on its side.
Yeah.
And then the other eye, brow up at the top. And then a very small, prim little mouth.
Yeah, very prim. Yeah.
But I think there's a second face.
Right.
And if we turn our heads like that,
OK,
then the little mouth becomes another eye, and the other eye remains an eye, but what was previously the eye on its side becomes a grinning mouth.
like a crude cartoon.
Exactly, like a crude gap-toothed grin.
So do you think it's safe to say that the marriage was on the rocks by this point?
Well, Picasso's painting at this period has often been related to problems he's having with his marriage. Of course, the big event really happened in 1927 when Picasso met his mistress, Marie-Thérèse, the beautiful teenage Marie-Thérèse. After that, then, his marriage with Olga was really in trouble.
Picasso's affair with Marie-Thérèse began when he was in his mid-40s and she was around 17. The relationship lasted 10 years, and his portraits of her have all the classic elements that most people associate with a Picasso. You can just about recognise Marie-Thérèse, but Picasso's not trying to show us her beauty. He distorted features and selected colours that reveal how he felt about his subject, trying to capture their emotions, their personality, their essence. For Marie-Thérèse, gentle, innocent, sexy. For a later lover, Dora Maar, disturbing, unhinged, anguished. The full emotive power of Picasso's technique would be realised in 1936. That was the year his beloved home country of Spain was ripped apart by a brutal civil war. One of the war's worst atrocities took the horror of modern warfare to a new extreme. In April 1937, a squadron of German aircraft who were supporting the Spanish fascists flattened the communist opposition-held town of Guernica with 5,000 bombs, massacring more than 1,600 civilians. It was the first time that Europe had suffered such ruthless, calculated terror bombing. Picasso's response was to create the most important painting of his life, and some think the most important painting of the 20th century, Guernica.
Whenever people talk about this painting, they always start by telling that story of the incredibly black day in April 1937, when the Basque town of Guernica was bombed to smithereens. And we know that that was the starting point for Picasso. As soon as he heard the news, he was inspired to this frenzy of energy and creativity. And in less than 6 weeks, he managed to cover this enormous canvas measuring 30 square meters. But I think that the reason this is so resonant and has spoken to people for so many decades is because it's not specifically about Guernica. Picasso isn't just commemorating that one catastrophe. He's encapsulating a whole century of suffering. And the way that Picasso does that is by creating this massive mess of mangled, dismembered limbs, as if the bomb has actually dropped from the air and just gone off, just as we come in. Look, for example, up at that light bulb with its jagged flare, which feels like an explosion going off as we're looking. And here to the left is such a pitiful, heart-rending picture of a woman carrying the corpse of her dead child. And I find the most affecting detail of this is the way that Picasso has painted her face, because it's almost like in her grief, her entire identity is dissolving before our eyes. Look at her nostrils and her eyes that seem to be dripping right off her head. And this soft, soft feel of her flesh leads up to that terrifying image of her mouth with that piercing tongue, which just means that you can almost hear that incredibly shrill sound of a mother's total in-the-moment grief for her dead child. This is a reminder of the barbaric depths to which we can reach, and looking at it is horribly, horribly shocking.
Guernica was first shown in the Spanish Pavilion at the 1937 Paris World Fair. This was a regular international exhibition of industry, culture and art. But Picasso's pacifist outcry went almost unnoticed, because the event was overshadowed by the antagonistic posturing of Nazi Germany on one side and the Soviet Union on the other. But Guernica's timing was critical to its later success. As the world teetered on the edge of the Second World War, the painting was sent on a global tour in support of the fight against fascism in Spain. And when the world did descend into war, the painting came to symbolize the unprecedented carnage and horror that was inflicted on the innocent. The painting was moved more than 50 times before it was eventually returned here to Madrid.
What's so amazing about seeing Guernica up close is that you get a real sense of how incredibly battered this painting really is. Because over the years, Guernica travelled the world umpteen times, and on each occasion that it was rolled up and shunted from one museum to another, the surface of the painting sustained just a tiny bit more damage. And today, you can make out all sorts of tiny tears and fractures and hairline cracks. Like, well, there's this 5mm cavity which is beneath the eye of a soldier down the bottom of the painting. But if you ask me, there's something quite pleasing about the fact that this devastating masterpiece about the effects of war has its own battle scars.
Today, Guernica is still a powerful symbol. When there's an anti-war protest, you're likely to see images of Guernica among the banners and placards. And then there's the incident in 2003 at the United Nations, when Colin Powell presented the case for war against Iraq. Someone noticed that the press conference afterwards was due to be held in front of a tapestry replica of Guernica. The decision was taken to cover it up with a blue drape. Picasso spent most of the Second World War cooped up in his Paris studio in this building, while the Germans occupied the city. Many of his friends fought in the communist resistance, and after the liberation of Paris, Picasso joined the French Communist Party. He remained a loyal member for the rest of his life, which seemed rather inconsistent with the millionaire celebrity lifestyle he now embarked on with gusto. Picasso became the communists' poster boy, regularly wheeled out to promote the cause, and then he became their poster designer. He created a version of the Dove of Peace to be used at the 1949 World Peace Conference. The image was chosen by a communist comrade who spotted it in one of Picasso's portfolios.
Picasso's celebrated Dove of Peace actually started life as an illustration of a pigeon. The model had originally been a gift from Picasso's on-again, off-again friend and great rival, the French artist Henri Matisse. And Picasso decided to immortalise the bird in this lithograph. His party friend immediately spotted the print's potential as a propaganda poster, as long as people believed that it was a dove. And that's how Picasso's pigeon ended up as the world-famous Dove of Peace.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the water...
Picasso later refined his dove, creating a simple, striking image.
To the bone.
Today, the dove has become the global symbol of peace, thanks largely to Picasso.
And you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, or the times they are a-changing.
When Picasso wasn't campaigning for international communism and world peace, he returned to his life as a multi-millionaire superstar artist. He spent much of his time on the French Riviera, and one of the places where he worked, in Antibes, is now the Picasso Museum.
People often say that Picasso switched between different artistic styles as often as an actor adopts different roles. And he worked in many different mediums too. He could turn his hand to anything with dazzling results. And that's exactly what happened after the Second World War, when Picasso began to explore the possibilities of working in, of all things, pottery.
He created more than 3,500 pieces of pottery, but also produced vast numbers of sculptures. And of course, there were hundreds of paintings. His fame and reputation were now so great that everything he made could be sold for a fortune. It was said that a blank scrap of paper was worth far more in Picasso's hands than hard currency.
By the mid-50s, his work had won him enormous fame, but Picasso the man had become an icon too.